So we learned in the Mishnah, the beginning of Perik Kol HaKelim, on Daf Kuf Chav Beis Amid Beis, that there are certain kelim that melachtan le'isser. They are designated for forbidden use, things that are a malacha on Shabbos. And the Mishnah told us that you're allowed to move them on Shabbos as long as you're moving it to use them for permissible use. Right? The Mishnah said the person can take a hammer that's designated for building, it's le'isser, and you can use it to crack open the walnuts. So the Gemara is going to focus on this inyan now. Zok the Gemara, towards the bottom of Kuf Chav Beis Amid Beis. Noitel Adam Kornes Cholo. Amar Rav Yehuda. So Rav Yehuda says, Kornes Shalagoizim, actually what the Mishnah is talking about, is a hammer that was designated for nuts. Lefatzeya Bayisagoizim. That's the kind of hammer that you're allowed to move on Shabbos to crack the nuts. Aval Shal Nafachin. If this is a hammer of a blacksmith, which is designated for Isser, it's a Malachte le'Isser, so that's something that you can't move on Shabbos. You can't move that on Shabbos. Zok the Gemara. So what do I see from here? Kasava, Rabbi Yehuda holds, Dava shemalachte le'Isser. A keli, a tool that's designated for something that's forbidden, right? A tool over here, the hammer for the blacksmith. Afilu l'tzayrich gufay, even if you need it to make use of this keli itself, you want to now use it for a permissible use to crack open nuts, that's the concept of l'tzayrich gufay. Let's remember that. When you're using the keli for a permissible use, asr, would be forbidden. Amalei Rabbe, so Rabbe asked on this, what Rav Yehuda said here, how could it be? How could you learn the Mishnah this way? Ela meyatov, this is the pshat regarding the hammer. Seife, in the end, in one of the cases of the Mishnah, what does it say? Diktoni vesarachas vesamazleg, or malzeg. A person is taking a shovel that's used for winnowing, or a pitchfork, lasis olive lekatan, and he's feeding a child with this. Rachas and malzeg mi miyachtile lekatan. Are these things that you could say are designated? They were lechatchila designated to feed a child with this. But negate a hammer, it's possible to say that the person put aside the hammer lechatchila to be used for walnuts, to crack open the nuts. And the same thing also regarding the other things that it says in the Mishnah. It could be a person decided to put aside an axe to cut open the figs, or a saw to cut cheese. You can say like the pshat that Rav Yehuda said. But when you get to a pitchfork, that a person like Chatchila put it aside to feed a child doesn't make any sense. So the Mishnah is talking about a keli that's malachtei le'isser. It's still designated for isser, but still you're allowed to use it to move it to feed a child. That's what you see here. Elam Rabbe. So therefore Rabbe says kornes shal nafachin. The Mishnah was talking about a hammer that was used by a blacksmith. So it's malachte le'isser. Lefatzeya boy ha'agaizen. And the Mishnah over here says that although it's a keli shemalachte le'isser, you're allowed to use it for the walnuts, to crack open the walnuts. Dr. Gemara, Kesava. So Rabbah holds, davar shemalachte le'isser, an item that is designated for isser, l'tzayrich gufay, but if you're moving it, because you want to use this hammer for something that's permissible, mutter, it's allowed. This is the halacha, actually, as we'll see in the Hemshech of the Gemara, we paskin like Rabba, any keli shemalachte le'isser. If you have a use for it, for something which is mutter, it's allowed to be moved on Shabbos for that purpose. Eis ve'abai le'Rabba, Abai asked Rabba a question. We learned in a Braise, meducha, a garlic crusher, im yesh bashum, if there's some garlic inside of it, metaltal and oisa. You're allowed to move it on Shabbos. If there's no garlic inside of it, then ain't metaltalin oisa. You're not allowed to move it. So the question is, why not? Maybe this garlic crusher could be used for something else that's permissible. A garlic crusher is a keli shemalachte le'isser. It's made to crush garlic, which is forbidden on Shabbos. It's a malacha. But it says ain't metaltalin oisa at all. Why not? According to Rabbi, it should be allowed l'tzayrich gufay. Amalei. So Rabbi answered, ha mani Rab Nechemyehi. This Braisa is following Rab Nechemiah's opinion, which we had already before. We're going to have again later. Rab Nechemiah was very machmer b'negei to muktzah. The Omar Rab Nechemiah said, "Ein keli nittel elo l'tzayrich tashmishay." A keli on Shabbos could only be used if it's being used for the purpose that this keli was designated for. So when you have a keli, a garlic crusher, that's designated to crush on Shabbos, So the only thing that we consider it to be a keli for is for crushing. So if you can't move it in order to be crushing with it, because that's asr, so you can't move it at all. Legabe anything else, it's as if it's not a keli anymore. This was brought up in the Gemara before, when you get to certain kalim, that their original use was, it broke, and it can't be used anymore for its original use. And the Gemara discusses, even after it's broken, could you use it for other things as well? And the Gemara says that yes, as long as you can still use it for something else, it's allowed. But Rav Nechemia holds it's only considered to be a keli as long as it can be used for its original use. So therefore, a keli shemalachta le'isser, you can never move on Shabbos because there's no such a thing that I can use it for something else which is heter. That's not its intended use. Sagt the Gemara weiter. Another question on Rabbi Eisvei Beshama Yoimrim Ein Neutlen es Ali lekatzav olav basar. On Yontif, you're not allowed to move an ali, which is a pestle, to cut meat on it. Beisil matir. Beisil say that even though it's something which is designated for crushing on it, and it's muktzah, it should be muktzah even on Yontiv, but for Simchas Yontiv, as Rashi says, they were matter to be able to use it. Shavin, and they both agree, she'im katzav olav basar, that if a person did use it to cut meat on it, she'asal ataltalei, that afterwards, once he's finished doing that work, that malacha preparing for the food of Yontiv, he's not allowed to move it anymore, because be'etzem this pestle is a keli which is made for forbidden use. It's a malachta le'isser. So again, you see right over here that something which is malachta le'isser cannot be moved on Yontiv. Can't be moved for anything on Yontiv. Not like Rabbi that said that it could be used for permissible use.
So it was used for Simchas Yontiv?
Yes.
Allowed to use it for?
Yes, there was a special heter according to Beis Hillel for Simchas Yontiv. But after you finish using it for the basar, to cut the meat on it, so now you're not allowed to use it you're not allowed to use it for anything else, even on the Yontiv. You're not allowed to use it for anything else.
On regular Shabbos, you wouldn't be able to use it.
Chlal, yeah. So Sava l'shanu yilei. So now the Gemara the Chatchila thought to answer this question, Rav Nechemia, the same like we said before, that this ali is a pestle that's designated for forbidden use, so therefore it's going to be muktzah according to Rav Nechemia. You can't use it for anything else. Kiv in the Shamalahadam Rav Chinana, but now once they heard what Rav Chinana Bar Shalmiya said, Mishmei de Rav, so he said the name of Rav as follows: Hakayil Maidim. Everybody agrees, Besichi, Zairi, Umazuri. These are various different tools that are used. There's two pshatim here in Rashi. One pshat in Rashi is that these are various different kalim that are used for dyeing. So of course they're all malachtan le'isser. Another pshat Rashi brings in the name of Rabbeinu Halevi. These are different kalim that are used in the weaving process. So these things, so Rav said, kivin, the koped alayu. A person is very particular about them. Miyachet lehu makim. He designates a place for them, he puts them away, they should be safely. So what's the pshat in this? This is really a new concept of muktzah that we'll see in Mitzvah Shem later again and again. This is what's known as muktzah machmas chesar and kis. When something is expensive and a person is very particular about them, he puts them away in a designated place and he wants it to stay there. So this is a new concept of muktzah. And because it's muktzah machmas chesar and kis, there is no heter that a person can move it, that he can use it for something else, not for its designated use. Over here, a person does not want it to be used for anything else. So this heter that we said before, letzayrich gufay, that you can use it to something else, does not apply here. So that's what Rav said when you get to these kalim. Hachanami, over here, the same thing is also regarding the ali, the pestle that we were speaking about, miyachad lehu makim. This is something that a person is very particular about, and he wants it to be in a specific place, and therefore the heter that Rabbi said that you can use a keli shemalachta le'isser, l'tzayrich gufay, if you're using it for another use, does not apply by something which is muktzah machmas chesar and kis. Itmar, we learned the machlaikis regarding this hammer that we were talking about in the Mishnah. We said you can use a hammer also to break, to crack the walnuts. What kind of hammer were we talking about? We're talking about a hammer that's used for gold, for shaping gold and so on. A hammer that by a goldsmith. That's what we're talking about here. Rav Shemen bar Abba Amar, kornis shel besamim shanino. We're talking about a hammer that a person uses to crush spices. So the Gemara explains, Man dama de besamim, the one that says that we're talking about a hammer that's used for spices, Kol shekain de zahavim. Definitely he would hold that the hammer that's used for gold is allowed to be moved for if a person wants to break open the walnut. So as Rashi explains, a person is much more particular about the hammer that he's using for the spices, that it's going to be using in his food, that it should be clean and shouldn't be used for anything else. So if he allowed a person to use the hammer of the besamim for something else, for sure the hammer of gold, which is something that a person uses for other things, he could, even if it gets chipped a little bit, he can smooth it out, he'll be able to use it for the gold. So for sure, he'll allow you to use the hammer that the goldsmith uses. Mandama shal zahavim, the one that holds that the Mishnah is talking about the hammer that the goldsmith uses, avol de besamim, he disagrees benegeh to the hammer of besamim, because by besamim kapad alaya. This is something that a person wants designated dafka for the besamim. If it gets dirty, it's repugnant, he's not going to use it for the food, for the besamim. So that's something that a person will not want to use for any other use. And like we mentioned before, that a person puts it aside, it's like muktzah machmas chasar and kiss, and therefore over there, the din of the Mishnah will not apply. The next thing that it said in the Mishnah was a sakoish v'sakarker. You could use a spindle or a weaver's rod. You could use it like a fork. That's the way the Mishnah described the use of this koish and the karker lachtoiv by, litchayv by, that is, to use it like a fork. Taner Rabbanon, we learned in a brayse, paga, unripe figs, shetomna beteven, that a person hid it inside of hay. And apparently this is a way to help it get ripe quicker. Charara, a cake or a biscuit, shetomna begechalim, that a person hid inside coals. So what's the halacha now? Are you allowed to take it out? So of course the hay or the coals are muktzah on Shabbos. If part of the figs or the cake that you hid there is still is revealed, so then it's exposed, you're allowed to just take it out. So even though when you take it out, what's going to happen? Some of the pieces of hay are going to fall into that cavity that now opened up, or the coals are going to fall in. You didn't move anything. You just moved this item which is not muktzah. You moved the figs or the cake. Whatever else falls, you didn't touch at all. So that's allowed. But vimlav, if it's not exposed a little bit and you can't just pick it up, then asalataltala. Because if you're going to move it, so then the muktzah hay, the muktzah gechalim are going to move as well. Even though you're not directly moving it, you're getting this cake out, and even without touching the gechalim, even without touching the coals of the hay, if a person sticks in a fork, okay, psik reisha benegeh to muktzah. This is not called, by muktzah we don't use the Indian of psik reisha. As we'll see in a moment, this is what's called tiltul minatzad, when you move something indirectly. Okay, there's muktzah when you touch something that's muktzah directly and you move it, and then there's when you move something which is muktzah by moving something else, and the muktzah that's on top of it will move together with it, or minatzad. Okay, so the Tanakama here holds that if it's under the coals, it's under the hay. So then, even if you stick in a fork to take it out, the coals and the hay, you're going to be moving it indirectly as well. You can take a spindle or a karker or this weaver's rod, and you can stick it in and take it out. And the hay or the coals will shake off automatically. So again, like I mentioned, this is called tiltul minatzad. Amar Rav Nachman, halachik Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoi. So Rav Nachman said, we paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoi, that you're allowed to move the cake, the figs, even though the muktzah is moving automatically. It's a tiltul minatzad and it's allowed. So we paskin like Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoi that this kind of tiltul of muktzah, which is indirect, is okay. The Savar Rav Nachman tiltul menatzad lo yishmei tiltul. Shall we say that Rav Nachman paskins like Rabbi Elazar ben Tadoi, that moving something indirectly, that's muktzah, is allowed? For ha'amar Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman said in a different place. Hai fugla, radish. So the radish is wide on one side, and it's narrow on the other side, right? Like just for example, like a carrot, right? So if a person took this radish and he inserted it into the ground, I guess to preserve it, so are you allowed to pull it out on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, depends how you inserted it. If you inserted it into the ground, that the wider, the thicker part is on the top, and the thinner side is in the ground, so then shadi, so then it's allowed. Because what happens when you pull it out of the ground? It doesn't move the earth at all. You just take it out. Mimato lemaila, but if you put it upside down, in other words, the thicker side inside and the narrower side outside, so now what happens when you pull it out? Aser, it's aser because when you pull it out of the ground, you indirectly move the earth as well. So over here we see that Rav Nachman said that when you indirectly move the muktzah earth, it's not allowed. And for the Gemara, Chodeber Rav Nachman Me'ahi. Rav Nachman had charata of that statement that he said there regarding this radish. Because Be'emes, as Taisus over here says, the Gemara is saying that Rav Nachman had charata from that, because La Halacha we paskin that tiltul minatzad is mutter. Well, let me just qualify that. What's meant tiltul minatzad is mutter? That doesn't mean that any muktzah, you can just indirectly move it. When you're moving muktzah for the purpose of a permissible use, then tiltul minatzad is going to be allowed. For example, over here, the person wanted to take the cake out of the coals, the person wanted to take the figs out of the hay, so you're moving a permissible thing, so then the muktzah minatzad, the muktzah that you move minatzad is allowed. But stamazai, something which is muktzah, to move it indirectly, to move it minatzad by moving something else, if it's not for permissible use, is not allowed. This muktzah minatzad is allowed, and therefore Rav Nachman had charata from what he said regarding the radish. The next thing we learned in the Mishnah, machat shel yad little bachulum, a needle that a person is going to use to take out a splinter. Shalach le Rav Berei de Rabbi Rav Yosef. He asks them the following question: Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu, our teacher should teach us. Machat shenitul charara uktzah mahu. A needle that the tip of the needle is not there anymore; it was removed. It's not sharp anymore. Uktzah. Again, let me start again. Charara is the eye of the needle, the hole, the eye in the needle, or uktzah, or the tip of the needle. Mahu. What's going to be the halacha then? It's not. It can't any be. It's not a keli anymore to be used as a needle. We know on Shabbos something that is a keli could be moved. Is not muktzah. But something that's not a keli, stam, a piece of metal that's not a keli at all, can't be moved. So the question is, now this needle doesn't have the tip anymore, or it doesn't have the eye anymore, so it can't be used as a needle. It's not a keli. Is it still usable for something, or it's muktzah? Amalei tenisua. We learned it in our Mishnah. Machat shel yad little basakaitz. The reason why you're allowed to use a needle on Shabbos, even though a needle is melachte le'isser, is because you're removing a splinter with it. To be able to remove a splinter, the splinter doesn't need the eye of the needle and it doesn't need a tip either. Even if it's not so sharp, it could also be useful for that. So what do you see? As long as you could use it to remove a splinter, it's allowed. So it doesn't make a difference if it has the tip or the eye in the needle. Hey Svei, so he asked him back a question. Machat shenitel charara uktzah. It says b'negeya to the halacha of tumah, that if you have a needle that the eye of the needle was removed or the tip of the needle was removed, so then tahira, it's not tumah anymore, right? B'negeya to tumah tar, we learned so many times before that if it's not a keli anymore, if you break it in a way that it's not a keli, can't be used for its purpose, so then it's not tumah anymore. So we see b'negeya to tumah that it's not a keli anymore. So he's asking, we should apply the same thing to Shabbos, that it's not a keli. Amar Abaye, so Abaye answered, Tumah Ashabbos Karamis. You're asking from a Mishnah that tells us the definition of a keli for Tumah, Lagabi the definition of a keli for Shabbos. What's the connection? Tumah, regarding Tumah, Kli Maisabinon. The expression that the Torah uses is that this keli has to still be a keli for what it was fashioned for, what this keli was made for. It was made to be to sew with it, so it has to be a keli for that purpose. Le'inyan Shabbos, but regarding Shabbos, it doesn't say that. Midi de chazibinon. For Shabbos, you need something that is a keli to be used for something. If it can be used for a certain purpose, so then it's allowed. And this needle, even if it doesn't have the sharpness of the tip and it doesn't have the eye of the needle, it still could be used to remove a splinter. So therefore, it's a Shabbos. It won't be muktzah. So you can't compare these two things. Amar Rava disagrees to Abaye. Rava says, no, Mande Kamaisev, Shape Kamaisev, the one that asked the question, did ask a good question. It is a good comparison to Tumah regarding a needle. Me'edele inyan Tumah lav manahu. If regarding Tumah, this needle is not a keli anymore, le'inyan Shabbos nami lav manahu. Regarding Shabbos, it's also not a keli. Now why? What's the logic of why Rava argues? L'chayra Abaye said a very good svara. Over there's a concept of clean maisa, that it has to be a keli for what it was fashioned for. You don't find that regarding Shabbos. So we'll see soon in the Hamshach of the Gemara here what the hesber of this is. Okay, but that it was fashioned for that though, to be makabel in it, as to serve as a keli. True, but it still is made for a keli to receive liquids in it, to be able to contain liquids in it. Meisvei, so we learned in a Braisa that it clearly says that there's a difference between Shabbos and Tumah. Machat, a needle, bein nekuva, bein she'ein nekuva, whether it has an eye, the hole in it, whether not. Mutal etaltla b'Shabbos. You're allowed to move it on Shabbos. V'liyamru nekuva. This that it says that a needle is only considered to be a needle if it has the eye in it, elalinyan tumah b'lvad. Regarding being a keli for tumah, that's only if it has the eye in the needle. So right over here it says very clearly that there's a difference between Shabbos and tumah. And for the Gemara, Tirgema Abaya, Aliba de Rava, even though Abaya argued in Rava, but Abaya himself explained this Braisa according to Rava, Begulmi Askinon. We're talking over there, that Braisa is talking about a needle that a person took pieces of metal and he's making needles out of pieces of metal, and he didn't make the needle yet. It was before it was finished to being made. So over there I say that for Shabbos, it's something that could still be used. Why? Because Zimnin de Mimla Chalayu Umashvilu Humana. This is something that a person is still planning on using. He didn't finish making it yet. He took from pieces of scrap, pieces of metal, and he's making needles out of them. He might still use it as a needle. He's not going to throw it out. If you had a needle that broke and the eye is not there in the needle anymore, or the tip broke off, so that's something that even for Shabbos is not going to be a keli anymore. And what's the reason? Adam zerka lebein grutois. Once a needle broke, what does a person do with a needle that broke? He's not going to bother fixing it. It's a small, tiny thing. He's just going to throw it out into the garbage between other broken pieces of metal. So this is the svar of Rava. Rava agrees to the concept that Abaya said before, that there is a difference in what makes a keli for Tumah and what makes a keli for Shabbos. But regarding a needle, that difference doesn't apply, because once a needle breaks, a person just throws it in the garbage. Yeah, technically he could use it to take out a splinter with it, and it would still be a keli for Shabbos. But papayil, a needle that breaks, a person just throws it in the garbage, so therefore it's considered to be like a scrap piece of metal, which is muktzah. It's not a keli at all anymore. Sagt the Gemara weiter, Asuvi Yenuka. This is a separate subject, but the Gemara is going to bring from our Mishnah in connection to this, so therefore the Gemara quotes it here. Asuvi Yenuka means to straighten out the limbs of a body of a baby when it's born. So there could be the limbs of the body that are dislocated, so you have to straighten it out, put it back in place. Is this allowed in Shabbos? Rav Nachman Oser. Rav Nachman says it's not allowed. Rav Sheish is Shari. Rav Sheish says it is allowed. Rav Nachman Minoah Minullah. How do I know that it's not allowed? The Tnan, because we learned in a Mishnah, we're going to learn this later, Mitzvah Hashem, Ein Oisen Apiktivzin B'Shabbos. You're not allowed to do Apiktivzin B'Shabbos. What's Apiktivzin? So Rashi explains that this is something that a person drinks in order to vomit. For what purpose? Why is the person doing this? So as Rashi explains, we're not talking over here about a person that's doing this as a refuah to heal himself. We're actually talking about a person that's eating and he's full and he wants to empty his stomach to be able to have space to eat more. So what does he do? He drinks something that will induce vomiting, and then he'll empty his stomach and he'll be able to eat more. That's apiktivzin. Okay? So it said in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos. Now what's the reason you're not allowed to do that on Shabbos? So Rashi says the reason is misaken gavra. You're repairing the person's body, making it empty to be able to have more food in it. So this, just like there's the concept of misaken keli, that you're not allowed to be misaken a keli on Shabbos, the person is not allowed to do something to be misaken his body to be able to contain more food in it. So Rav Nachman said the same thing applies to a baby. A baby that's born and the limbs of the body are not together in the right place, so you're not allowed to put it in the straighten out the limbs in the right place. You're repairing the body of the baby. But Rav Sheishes disagrees. Rav Sheishes says it's not a comparison to that Mishnah. Hasam lav orche. Over there, what a person is doing to eat, to induce vomiting, to empty his body, that's not something usual b'chlal. So that's mamish, something that's being done in a very specific way to repair your body. That's aser. Chazal made a gzeira on that, and it's aser. However, over here, orche. this is something which is very usual to take care of the baby's body. What Rashi explains, what the Gemara means by orchai is just like you're allowed to feed a baby, you're allowed to give it the food that it needs to be able to be healthy. And that's not considered to be repairing the body, it's just eating and drinking. So the same thing also, putting the limbs in the place of the baby, that's considered to be a normal thing by every baby that's born, and that's not something that has a special, unusual repair that you're doing to the body. What's my proof? What is my raya to my opinion that you're allowed to do this on Shabbos? Tanan, because we learned in our Mishnah, machat shal yad, the person takes a needle, and what is he using it for? Little ba sakites, to take out a splinter. So over here as well, the splinter in his body is bothering him, and the person takes out the splinter, and it's repairing something in his body. So you see in our Mishnah, you could repair something in your body. The same thing also with the limbs of the baby. That's Rav Shesh's raya. What the Gemara says, no, it's not a raya. But Rav Nachman answers to this raya. Hasam pakid. By the case of the splinter, it's not repairing the body itself. You have something else that's embedded in the body, and you're just removing it. The body is okay. You have something else that's stuck in the body that's giving you pain, and you remove it. But hacha loy pakid. Over here, there's nothing that's stuck in the baby's body. Over here, the actual body itself, the limbs of the body, it's dislocated. The limbs are not in the right place. By you putting the limbs of the baby back in the right place, you're actually repairing the body according to Rav Nachman. And therefore it's not allowed on Shabbos. If it's done with a machine, with no. Yeah, it's done by hand. It's done. They wrap the baby in a blanket and whatever. However, it's done. It's not something which is done. Yeah. Mesaken gavra. Rav Nachman had gehalten that this is called mesaken gavra. You're repairing the body of a baby.
You have to. It's not like a.
Kanira, it's not something which is a sakana at all. Kanira, it's something that could wait. Zok the Mishnah, koneh shal zeisim. This is a rod that's used for olives. So as Rashi explains, how do they use this for the olives? After the olives are taken off the tree, so they take the olives and put them into a vat, and over there it has to sit until it becomes ripened enough, until it becomes prepared to be used in the press. And they have to check the olives to see if it's ready or not. So they had this rod. They would turn over the olives to check the olives to see if it's ready to be pressed. Im yesh kesher b'roishai, if this rod has this knot at the tip of it, so then mekabel tumah. Because it has this tip, it's mekabel tumah. But vim lav, if it does not have this knot on it, a mekabel tumah, it's not mekabel tumah. It's just considered to be like a plain piece of wood, which has no kli kibble in it. So therefore, it's not mekabel tumah. But benkach, either way, nitl b'Shabbos, it's something that a person could move on Shabbos because it does have a use on Shabbos. You can use it for other things on Shabbos. Zok the Gemara, amai, pshute kliyet. So why are you saying that if it has this knot on the top? Okay, so there has this something on the top basically to plug it or to close this rod on the top. Why is that make it something which is not going to be a keli for tumah? It seems to be just like a plain stick, which is pshute kliyetz. It's not a keli b'chlal. Or pshute kliyetz eina mekablan tumah. Any piece of wood that does not have a shape of a keli is not makabel tumah. How do we know? My time, dumye the sack. We had this before. It's compared to a sack. When the Torah says the halacha of tumah, it compares it to a sack cloth, just like not a sack, but actually a sack. A sack is something that has an opening where you can put things inside of it. So that be'inon, you have to have anything else of wood. It says oy eitz, oy klisak. So the eitz has to also be something that has a cavity, episode opening that you could put inside of it. So why would this rod used for the zeisim, even if it has a knot in it, why would it be tomei? Why would it be makabel tomei? And for the Gemara, Tanim Ishmei the Rav Nechemya, B'shah shemahapach bezeisim hoivchoi v'royabai. This knot that there is on the tip of this rod, it does have some kind of a cavity in it. And what happens is when they're turning over the olives, they're not only looking at the olives to see if it's ripe or not, but then they look at the tip of the rod to see the oil, the quality of the oil of the olives that it was turning over, to see if it's ready to be pressed or not. So therefore, it does sort of have a small kli kibble over there where it could contain some oil, and therefore it would be makabel tumah. Zok the Mishnah, Rabbi Yosi Aimer, Kol hakelim nitolim. All different kinds of kalim a person is allowed to move on Shabbos, right? As we said in the first Mishnah of this Perek, including kalim that are designated for Isser, but if a person wants to use it for permissible use, it's allowed. Chotz min ha-maser ha-gadol, besides a very big saw, which is used to cutting boards, and it's something which is very expensive. A person that he designates a place for it. This is again the concept of a keli shemelachte, not only melachte le'isser, but it's muktzeh machmas chasar and kiss. A person doesn't use it for other things. And also yeset shel machreisha, the plow that is used in the field that has a certain knife in it, which is very expensive, that a person puts aside and he doesn't use that knife for anything else. Otherwise, so these are the two expensive things that a person won't use for anything else, and those are muktzah to be used on Shabbos for anything. Amar Rav Nachman, so the Gemara brings now other examples of things that are very expensive that a person puts aside and he doesn't want to use it for anything else. Hi, uchle de katzri. So Rashi explains, uchle de katzri. Katzri are launderers. So the people that did the laundry, they had this special copper basket or copper bowl that they placed the laundry inside of it, and the bowl had holes in it, and they would rinse the laundry inside of it and the water would come through. That's the first pshat in Rashi. Another pshat in Rashi says is they would make a fire with coals with incense to create a certain good aroma, and they would place this bowl on top of that fire so that for the aroma to go through for the clothing, to freshen it up. So this kind of a basket, this is a basket that people are not going to use for anything else. They put it aside for this purpose. They're very particular about it, and therefore it's compared to this knife that's used in the plow that is going to be muktzah. Amar Abaye said, Charbe de oshchefi, the knife that the tanners use, the ones that work with leather. Chsachine de ashkafte, the knife of ashkafte. So this is machlekes of Rashi and Taisus. Rashi says this is a butcher's knife. Taisus says this is the chalaf of the sheichet. V'chatzine de nagri, and a certain tool, not sure what kind of tool this is, but is a certain tool of a carpenter. Ki yeset shel machreisha dami, these are also very expensive tools that a person is very particular and he designates it for that use, and therefore it's going to be muktzah on Shabbos to be used for anything. So we have other examples that are similar to what it says in the Mishnah. And the same thing is also today. Certain things that are muktzah, machmas chasar, and kiss, that we know the derech of the people is that they're makbid, they don't want to use it for anything else. Now the Gemara, what to use? Exactly, for the pegimah. Yeah, Taisus I think says that beferish. Shuleti pogim, exactly. That's the reason why a sheikh won't want to use the knife, anything else. Yeah. Tanarabanan, now we have a braisa over here, which basically we see over here the source of how muktzah developed. Bari Shaina, in the beginning when Chazal made the gzeira of muktzah, so what happened? They saw that the Yidden weren't keeping Shabbos properly, as we'll see later on in the Gemara. This was actually even before the times of Chazal. We'll see soon. So they made the gzeira of muktzah. So the gzeira was hayuayimrim. They said shloisha kelim nitalim b'Shabbos. There are only 3 kelim that are not muktzah that would be allowed to be used on Shabbos. Miktzaya shel dveila, a knife that's used for dveila, for the figs. Zuama listerin shel kedera, a ladle that's used to remove the foam that's on top of a soup. V'sakin ketana shel gabe shulchan, and a knife that's used on a table. Those were the things that they allowed. Those were the kelim that they said that they were allowed to be used on Shabbos. Everything else they said should be muktzah. Oh, so Taisus over here explains that when it says everything else what's muktzah, it doesn't refer to the simple things that a person uses as a keli, a cup, a bowl, a plate, and a fork, a spoon. Those things are obviously not muktzah, but these are examples of things that do not have a clay kibble to it, b'chlal, right? A knife, different kinds of knives over here, basically. So those kinds of things, they said a muktzah. So all these other kinds of tools, an axe, a saw, all these kinds of, they said everything is completely muktzah besides these 3 things. Now then, hitiru, once the Yidden accepted upon themselves, they saw that they were keeping Shabbos more, so they were matter. V'chazru v'yitiru, they were matter a second time. V'chazru v'yitiru, and they were matter a 3rd time. Acha amru, until they finally said, Kol hakelim nitolim b'Shabbos, that all kelim are allowed to be moved on Shabbos, including, as we said, whether it's a keli shemalachta leheter, a keli shemalachta leisser, they can all be moved on Shabbos, as we'll see soon the details. Chutz min maser agadol v'yeser shemachreisha. What remained of the muktzah that can't be moved at all is, like we learned in the Mishnah, the maser agadol, the large saw or the knife that's used in a plow. That is something that a person is very particular about. It's muktzah machmas chasar and kis. That remained. That gzeira of muktzah remained on that. So now the Gemara is going to explain the pshat in this brayse, because it said 3 times that there was a heta 3 times. Ma hitiru v'chazr v'hitiru v'chazr v'hitiru. What were the 3 heterim that they made over here? Amar Abaye, so there's a machlokes Abaye and Rava. Abaye says, hitiru, the first heta was dava shemalachta leheter, a keli that's designated for permissible use, l'tzayrich gufay. If you have to use it for something, you need this keli itself to be used for something. That was the first heta. Chazr v'hitiru, then they were matter a second time, dava shemalachta leheter, a keli that's used for permissible use, l'tzayrich mekayma. You don't have to use it itself for something, but you need the space that it's sitting on. You have to empty that space. So l'tzayrich mekayma, they also allowed it. That was the second heter. Chazr v'hitiru, then the third heter was davar shemalachta leisser, a keli that's designated for forbidden use, l'tzayrich gufay in. So the third heter was, they said that such a keli could be used if you have to use the guf of the keli itself. That was the example we had in the Mishnah, to take a hammer and break a walnut. L'tzayrich mekayma loy. But to move a forbidden keli from its place, because you need that space, that they won't matter. Va'adayin, and still the heter is only biyada yachas, if you could move it with one hand, if it's light enough to be moved with one hand. B'shtei yadav, if it's a heavier tool or a heavier thing that you have to move with 2 hands, loy. That they said you're not allowed to move. But sha'amru, until they were matter even more, and they said, kol ha'kelim nitalim b'Shabbos, you're allowed to move anything on Shabbos, va'afilu b'shtei yadayim. Even something that is heavy enough that you have to move it with 2 hands. So basically what we see over here is that it changed 4 times. Not only 3 times, the heter was 4 in 4 stages.
Okay, mate.
So according to Abaye, davar shemalachta leisser, l'tzayrich mekayma, they were never matter. Rava argues though. Amalei Rava, we don't paskin like Abaye, we paskin like Rava. Amalei Rava mechti, let's see, hitiru ketani. It says that they made a heter. Whether you're talking about the heter for a keli shemalachta leheter or keli shemalachta leisser, they said you could move it. Mali l'tzayrich gufay, mali l'tzayrich mekayma. If they said that this is a keli that they took away the muktzah and they allowed you to move it, what difference does it make if the purpose of you moving it is because you have to use this keli itself, or because you need the space that the keli is on? If they took away the muktzah and they allowed you to move it, Rava holds there's no reason to be mechalik. Either way, you have a need to move it. You have a use for it. Whether for the it itself or to move it for the space, there should be no difference. He didn't hold it as chiluk. So therefore Rava teaches differently. Hitiru dava shemalachta leheter, the first heter was, they said a permissible keli could be used, bein l'tzayrich gufay, bein l'tzayrich mekayma, you're allowed to use it, whether for its own sake, to use it itself, or whether because you need the space. Chazr v'hitiru, now the second heter was, mechama l'tzel. When you're moving the keli, you don't need the space, you don't need the use of the keli, but this keli is exposed in the sun and it could get ruined, and you're moving it, sometimes it's called l'tzayrich atzmai, for its own purpose, that it shouldn't get ruined in the sun, you want to move it to the shade. That's another heter, because over here you don't even need it b'chlal. It's just for the purpose of the keli itself. They will matter that. The third heter, chazru v'hitiru dava shemalachta leisser, then they will matter a keli that is designated for forbidden use, l'tzayrich gufay. They will matter a keli for forbidden use, both l'tzayrich gufay and l'tzayrich mekayma, for whether you need it itself or you need the space on it. In that they will matter, but mechama l'tzeil loy. The chumrah that there is by a keli shemalachta leisser that you don't have by a keli shemalachta leheter is you're not allowed to move a keli that's for forbidden use just for its purpose itself, because you want to save it from being exposed in the sun. Something that could be used by one person himself, that they're allowed to move. If it's too heavy that 2 people have to move it, that they didn't allow. Even if it's something that's heavy that 2 people have to move it, they allow that to be moved on Shabbos. So basically, One of the things of the machlokes over here is benigeya to a davar a keli shemalachta leiser. According to Abaye, the heter was only l'tzorech gufa, if you're going to use it itself, not to make a space for it, not l'tzorech mekaymai. Rava says there's no difference. The heter of keli shemalachta leiser was whether it's l'tzorech gufa, whether l'tzorech mekaymai. Only mechama l'tzeil, if you're moving this forbidden keli because you want to take it away from the sun, you want it for the tzorech atzmai, as I said, it's sometimes called that. They said is not allowed. Eis ve'Abaye. So now the Gemara brings the two brises that we already had before. So Abaye asked the question: Miducha, a garlic crusher, im yesh bashom. If there's garlic inside, metaltel l'naisa, you're allowed to move it. Vim lav, if there's no garlic inside, metaltel l'naisa, you're not allowed to move it. So this is obviously a keli that's made for forbidden use, malachta le'iser, and it says you're not allowed to move it. Why are you not allowed to? So what do you see over here? So you see over here that it's aser. What is it aser? According to Abaye, we understand it's also to move it if you need the space. L'tzorech mekaymai. But the Rabbi said that a keli shemalachta leiser, you're allowed to move it l'tzorech gufa, you're allowed to move it l'tzorech mekaymai. So why aim metaltel l'naisa? And for the Gemara, hacha b'mayaskinon mechama l'tzeil. Even according to Rabbi, you're not allowed to move a keli shemalachta leiser for its own benefit to take it away from the sun, and that's what this Brais is talking about. The Emes says the teretz is so pashit. Taisva says that Abaye understood that Ravi could give this answer. He just wanted to see maybe he had a better answer. It's interesting because it's a very pushed answer. The same thing, the next brayse, Eisve, the brayse we had before, Vishavin Shem Katzaval of Basa Sha'asal Taltala, a pestle that's made for crushing on it. It's a Malachta Le'isr. After it was used for the meat on Yontiv, you're not allowed to move it for anything else. So what is it also for? According to Rava, if you're allowed to move it, L'tzorech Gufa and L'tzorech Mekaymai, so why does it say it's Aser? And for the Gemara, Hachanami Mechama L'tzeil. The Isser was B'nigeya to Mechama L'tzeil, moving it from the sun into the shade for its own purpose. That's what it's not allowed for.